Every year, like clockwork, on Christmas Eve, the brilliant evangelist E. Stanley Jones would share his favorite preaching story of all time, the story of the schoolboy from Africa who was sent to America by his dad because the education he could get in a boarding school here would be better than the education he could get in a village school there. The boy accepted the logic behind his move without a whole lot of angst, and although he was separated from his family by the vastness of an ocean, he actually did pretty well. That is, until Christmas time. After hearing reports that the boy was nursing a pretty bad case of the holiday blues, the headmaster of the school paid a visit to the young man's room. They chatted for a while, and before he left, the headmaster asked if there was one thing, maybe more than any other, that the boy would like for Christmas, which is when the little guy pointed at the photograph of his mom and dad hanging on the wall above his bed, and he said, "All I really want for Christmas is for my father to step out of that frame." Now, my pastoral sensibilities tell me that little boy has plenty of company in that department, because many of you would say the same thing to a photograph that hangs on one of your walls or sits on one of your tables. If only, just for one night, you could step out of that frame. I know I have pictures like that at my house, wishes like that in my heart, and so do you. Tonight is a night where nostalgia and new birth collide, a night where simplicity carries the day, we hope, and shuts the door on 4 weeks of madness. It's a night where our gaze is fixed wistfully on a few frames around our house and the framing of a rugged Bethlehem birth in Luke chapter 2, which Kathy just read. Tonight, I want us to frame that birth in Luke 2 through the frame of another lens of Luke chapter 15. 38 years ago, Dr. Oswald Golter, a beloved longtime missionary to China, befriended a young Chinese artist there. Because of their friendship, this young artist was drawn to the love and to the grace of the faith and eventually became a Christ follower. And one day the young artist said to Dr. Golder, "You know, I learned truth best by painting it. Tell me how to paint the Christian faith." Well, the wise old missionary did a brilliant thing. He pondered for a hot minute, then he pulled out his Bible and began to read. He turned to Luke 15 and he said, "Listen to this, my young friend. This is the parable of the prodigal son. There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, I want right now what's coming to me.' So the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed his bags and left for a distant country, and there he wasted everything he had. After he'd gone through all his money, there was a bad famine all throughout that country, and he began to really hurt. He signed on to work for a citizen who assigned him to take care of the pigs. He was so hungry he would have eaten the corn cobs in the pig slop, but no one gave him anything, and that brought him to his senses. He said, 'I'm going to go back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand.' And he got right up and he went home to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him. With his heart pounding, he ran out and embraced him and kissed him. The son started his speech, 'Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you. I don't deserve to be called your son ever again.' But the father wasn't listening. He was calling out to his servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes, dress him up, put the family ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet. We are going to feast. We're going to have a wonderful time. My son is here. He was given up for dead, and he is now alive. Paint this parable, Oswald Golter said to his young friend, and you will have the essence of the Christian faith. And so this young artist undertook the project of painting the parable. His first attempt showed the prodigal son far down the road from his dad's house, trudging towards home, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat. His clothes are dirty and they're tattered. He's the picture of shame and remorse. The father of the prodigal son looks like Mr. Clean. His arms are folded dramatically across his chest. He's looking sternly down the road with this very severe, "I told you so" expression on his face. When the artist showed Dr. Golter the painting, Golter pondered it and he said, technically, it's a beautiful work of art. But honestly, it misses the entire point of the parable. Go back, read the story again. This time the artist pored over every word in the passage and went back literally to the drawing board. He painted another picture and he called Oswald Golter and he said, "Come see this second attempt." It yields an entirely different portrait, a father running excitedly towards his long-lost son, his robes flapping in the wind, a look of joy and relief on his face. And if you pay attention to the detail at the bottom of the picture, you notice the most disarming, telling, curious detail of all. The father's shoes are two different colors. Oswald Golter complimented his young friend on the painting, and then he said, "I got to ask you about the shoes. One is black, the other's blue. They don't match. Why?" His young friend said, "Think about it, Dr. Golter. 1,000 times that father has looked down that road, longing for this moment, praying for this moment, and now here it is. He can't wait to see his son and hug him and welcome him home. He's so anxious to welcome him that he grabs the two nearest shoes, puts them on, and runs to meet him. It doesn't matter that the shoes don't match. All that matters is that his son is coming home." The father who wears mismatched shoes. Every year, like every preacher everywhere on this night, I struggle to find the best way to sneak up behind you and to surprise you with the power of the gospel. What can be said on this night that can't have already been said? Which is why the God of mismatched shoes speaks so eloquently on Christmas Eve. My friend and colleague Michael Brown says this about that kind of love. "I was Christmas shopping last year in Winston-Salem," he said, "when I bumped into a member of one of my former churches, a dear woman. She and her husband, two of the finest people I've ever known. They have a son and a daughter, both truly wonderful kids when I knew them. But when Rebecca, their daughter, turned 16, she started running with the wrong crowd. In time, Rebecca dropped out of school. She went on the run for a while, hopscotching from North Carolina to Texas and then to Florida, looking for the good life, but living the hard life. She cut off all contact with her parents, with her former friends. She wouldn't answer her parents' phone calls. She finally came back to town and she moved in with a couple of guys across town. Her parents got a tip about where she was living, but when they tried to visit, She wouldn't come to the door when they rang the bell. And since then, 8 years of holidays have come and gone without a word. When I bumped into her mother, he said she was carrying 2 bags filled with these brilliantly wrapped packages, and I said, "Looks like your hubby is going to have a great Christmas." And she answered and said, No, these are for Rebecca." "That's great," I said. "Things must be finally turning around." And she said, "I wish that were the case. She won't have anything to do with us. It'll be just like last year. I'll take the packages to her front porch. I'll knock on the door. No one will answer. I'll leave the gifts, and then I'll go home." I didn't know what to say, Michael Brown says. Finally, more or less, I mumbled, "I'm so sorry. That must be so heartbreaking." And she said, "You know, my daughter has taken a lot of things away from me, but there are some things she cannot take. On the dresser next to my bed, I have a picture of her when she was 2. I bet I look at that 50 times a day. Every time I see it, I think of the lullabies, the diapers, the bottles, holding her hand when she took her first step, the feel of her arms around my neck, the first time she said, 'Mommy, I love you,' the Christmas pageants at church, the plays at school, the ballet lessons. All those memories she cannot take away. And so I give her these gifts just to say thanks for all those wonderful years and to let her know that whether or not it is ever reciprocated, the one thing Rebecca cannot take away is my love for her." I just stood there, he said, once again not knowing what to say, but feeling I'd been in the presence of a love that was holy. She hugged me goodbye and smiled and said, "And who knows, Michael, maybe one day when I deliver her gifts and knock, she'll open the door." When I think about that encounter, I am convinced it is a parable about God's deep, deep love for you and for me. I think of the times I've disappointed God, the times I've walked away, the times I've strayed. I wonder sometimes what God thinks when he looks on his bedside table at the framed picture of me alongside the pictures of all of you, his beloved children. I bet he remembers our first steps, the time we first placed our hand and our life in his hands, the first time we told him, "I love you." I wonder if the last thing he says at night, after staring at our pictures for a long, long time, is something like this: "All those memories, they cannot take away. No matter what they do, they cannot take away my love for them." And who knows, maybe the next time I visit, they'll finally open the door. Tonight is the night, my friends. God visits our world on this holiest of nights, coming to us as the Word made flesh to show us the depth of his love for us, his beloved children. Whatever you've done this year, wherever you have been, it matters not. Thomas Wolfe, as much as I love him, is wrong. You can go home again. All you have to do is open the door. Tonight, the God of mismatched shoes steps out of the frame of history, wrapped in the flesh of a baby, his arms stretched wide, ready to receive you, ready for you to receive him. O holy child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today. We hear the Christmas angels, the great glad tidings tell. Come to us, abide with us, our Lord, Emmanuel.